All right. Hi, friends. Welcome to the fourth and final part of this LLLC mini-series where I'm going to be discussing major wireless trends and what that means for the controls industry. My name is John Wilson. I'm a founding director of Fernhill Shopworks, a market research firm specializing in the lighting market and utility programs. And this fourth and final video, it stands on its own, but it really builds on the previous videos. So if you haven't watched those yet, I really encourage you to do so. And with that said, let's jump right back into the story where we left off. Viewers of part 3, remember I introduced this diagram and I said this is really helpful for us when thinking about the evolution of lighting control systems with regards to their networking ability and their system capabilities and their hardware requirements. And if you watch that video, then you recall how I said we were describing a pre-mesh networking world, right? Well, now we've arrived, right? And if I was going to drop mesh into this graph, I would actually put it right here. Okay. Now, somebody might think because it's 5, it should just drop off the bottom. But for purposes of capabilities, I assure you, this is really where it fits in. And we're going to explain why. Okay. Now, eagle-eyed observers have no doubt noticed, I'm calling it low energy mesh right here. And you're not going to hear me use that phrase low energy throughout, but because I know we have a broad range of people viewing this, I do want to take a second to talk about what that means, because you'll sometimes hear people talk about, LE protocols, or most of us have seen BLE, like Bluetooth Low Energy. So I want to take a second to talk about what exactly do we mean low energy, and then throughout when I talk about mesh, you'll know I'm talking about low energy mesh. We just say mesh though, okay? So wireless is this catch-all phrase that we use when talking about everything wireless, right? And considering that this stuff in lighting matters and we know we need to be specific, it's kind of funny we have such an ambiguous phrase that we throw about all the time. If we're talking about wireless, most people immediately think of Wi-Fi, right? Because of its like ubiquitous nature in our lives. However, specific to lighting systems, Wi-Fi plays a pretty small role, like specific to lighting. Really, if I said what lighting protocols, wireless protocols do you know, you would probably be familiar with some of these ones here, which are examples of low energy protocols. Okay, so the name kind of gives it away, but let me just drive this home. Wi-Fi is intended for very high data transfer use, and it uses a lot more energy. Okay, so think about your cell phone or your laptop, both of which have Wi-Fi and are predominantly Wi-Fi based devices, right? And so they do have batteries, but they got to be charged like once a day. Okay, now compare that with low energy protocols, which oftentimes are able to operate for extremely long periods of time on batteries alone. Okay, and it turns out that lighting and like connected buildings in general are great applications for these low energy protocols, that some of which you're already familiar with. So we're introducing low energy protocols here as distinct from Wi-Fi, right? When we say wireless, like this distinction matters because we're pretty much just going to be talking about low energy stuff from here on out. Now, real quick, 2 reasons why low energy protocols are a big deal. And this matters, folks, so bear with me, okay? All right, the first is because low energy protocols enable these battery powered devices. And so everybody who works in lighting has heard somebody else in lighting say, lighting is going to be the backbone of IoT because it's powered, right? And if that is true, which I mostly agree with, turns out there's a lot of other powered stuff too, but I mostly agree with that statement. Well, then wireless battery powered like edge devices, right? If lighting fixtures that are powered are the backbone, well, all these other little edge devices that are also synced up, those are like the central nervous system. That's what gets the nerves all the way to the end point. Okay, so low energy protocols enable that. And the other thing that is a big deal is that low energy protocols offer improved capabilities and network performance. And this is why you'll hear people talk about mesh networks as more resilient and self-healing. And they have this dynamic where they are more software-based than hardware-based, as opposed to their, when we were talking in the last slide about gateways, which is itself a physical piece of hardware. And what that lends to is greater interoperability and future-proofing and being able to patch, for security risks and stuff like that. There's just a whole host of benefits from using a low energy protocol mesh network over a gateway reliant network. All right, so when I say low energy protocols are like the cornerstone of IoT, that might sound like a really grandiose statement, and I realize we don't got a lot of time here for me to back that up, but I would challenge somebody to tell me that's not true. And in fact, I would say most people who work in this space, they kind of start from this cornerstone. All right. So everybody remembers this slide. I had it up there, and then we dropped in low energy mesh networks, right? And those of you who are with me for the last part 3, the last little video we did, we said in conventional room-based systems, they were reliably limited to these capabilities and these configuration methods, right? We said in a pre-mesh world, if you had a room-based system, not only was the network limited to the room, right? We said networked-ish, but you were reliably restricted to these capabilities and these configuration methods. And then we said, by adding that gateway, you not only expanded the network, but you added these additional capabilities. And then the one that, I just keep harping on is that's even what got you the app-based configuration. Okay, so this was the world that we were building up to. So same concept, we're just expanding that lens out a little bit more. Okay, in this first box, we have our conventional room-based systems, just as I described them. No gateway required. We have the hardware requirements are absolute minimum. The network is limited to the room. We have these same capabilities and configuration methods that we talked about on the past slide. Then in the middle box, we have added a gateway to the network. The network is now expanded, typically only across one floor of a building, and then you have to add more gateways. And we've also added these additional capabilities that we highlighted on the last slide, okay? Including that pivotal one, app-based configuration. Now, in the same view, we also see our fourth box over here. These are those IoT capable systems that we talked about, right? And we said for these systems, you already have the network capability, but you typically have to add an additional server. And it might be located on site, it might be in the cloud, it really doesn't matter. But it is worth noting, we have new additional capabilities at this point, right? Cool stuff like beaconing and all this other great IoT stuff that's out there, okay? And if we were to pause right here, okay, this is the world before mesh networks, and with a really high level of consistency, okay? I'm telling you folks, I reviewed 24 systems, 24. And this is reliably how system approaches break down. And it's like very, very much according to what hardware you have added is what gets you there, okay? And then mesh comes along, and this is what brings us into the current epoch, right? I think I said earlier, we've made it, all right? So we've made it. To represent mesh in this diagram, I'm going to put the orange dotted box around it, okay? So that's going to be what signifies, using these 3 boxes we have right now to describe what mesh gets us without a gateway. I'm going to highlight it with the orange. So here we go. The first thing mesh gets you, if you have a mesh system, sans gateway, you get everything that's in this first box, but like, that's not getting us much because we were already getting that with our old school system that didn't require a gateway, right? So it's like Shania Twain, that don't impress me much. What else? What else do you got? All right. The other thing that a mesh network does for us is it's going to expand our network, right? It's expanded our network, not just throughout the floor, it's going to expand your network as far as you have devices that are within proximity, okay? So you can expand the network across the entire building now and not have a gateway. You're still going to need other hardware devices, but you don't need that gateway, which again is the really critical hardware piece. Okay. In addition to expanding the network, it also adds cool things like personal control. Okay, this is going to allow a teacher in a classroom to use their phone with a multi-level user authentication to, they can get into the system with their PIN, but they can only change the lights in their system. Okay, that's what we're talking about when we say personal control. And the other thing it gets you is that critical app-based configuration. If you have the basic mesh system out there, you can configure it with a smart device and you don't need that gateway. That is critical, folks. It's like, I feel like I'm on Price is Right or something. It doesn't stop there though. The other thing I want to highlight is mesh is also what is critical. Oh, I'm going too far, forgive me. Mesh is also critical for enabling some of this other cool stuff over here, like beaconing, like wayfinding and stuff like that also really benefits from mesh. But these ones I've got highlighted here, I feel like are really the critical ones as far as what does mesh bring to the project? What does mesh bring to the system that is a game changer between the world we were living in when we used to think about this just in terms of like, we have room-based systems with or without a gateway. We want those features, now we have to add the gateway. So here, seeing how we've overlaid the mesh in the orange, you see exactly how it sort of expands, not just the network, but the additional capabilities. So that being said, mesh definitely expands your capabilities, but it's not a substitute for these other things. Like if you want scheduling or you want demand response, you're still going to need a gateway. And this is one of the things that I think trips people up is almost in a sense, because some folks have made gateways like the bad thing that we're trying to avoid. Well, it's like, there is no avoiding. If you want scheduling or demand response or to integrate with another system, you're going to need a gateway. Okay, so mesh gets you a lot further, but it's super, super common. I mean, incredibly common that you see mesh systems with a gateway for complete capabilities, okay? And it wouldn't be uncommon at all if you had a mesh system without a gateway, and then you would have, the features I have outlined here in orange, but no others, okay? So this is what a mesh network does in terms of expanding the network and adding additional capabilities. All right, we're going to pivot off that. And in this last section, we're going to take a look at this market map that I've created to help plot wireless trends by both protocol type and approach. And there's going to be a lot of information on the next couple slides. So to help us ease in and to give everyone a familiar point of reference, I want to lay out a framework that I think most of us are pretty familiar with, all right? And I will be the first to say this metaphor doesn't walk on all four legs, as the saying goes, meaning like, I realize there are like bits of it that can be picked apart from the angles, but generally speaking, it works pretty well. One more thing, actually two more things. Just because I am describing something here as more or less open, that isn't a reflection of all of that system's ability to partner and play well with others. So we're all familiar with the fact that like Apple, which has, is famous for its proprietary high walled garden, has tens of thousands of partners that choose to work with it because it's a really great system, okay? So nothing about this market map implies good or bad or better or worse. It was merely an exercise in charting these different wireless approaches by major lighting manufacturers so we could get a better sense of what's happening. And if somebody from industry is watching and they think I've put their system in the wrong place, mea culpa, reach out, let's talk about it. And, of course, I'd love to update it. So let's dive into this. In this first pass, you'll likely recognize a whole bunch of systems you're familiar with. And at this point, I'm simply highlighting where systems fall in terms of most open to most proprietary. And at this highest of levels, the trend we can see here is that the proprietary built on open approach is what dominates the market. And that's really been the long-term trend, right? So it's like, so far, no big surprises here. It's like, I might not have known which systems, but I could have told you that, right? That's a acceptable response at this point if you're listening to me at home. All right, so let's add a little bit more information to this so we can get a little bit more juice for this squeeze. In this next pass, we're going to dive deeper and look at the specific protocol approaches. So in the upper third of the circles, you see systems which are designed around Bluetooth. And in the bottom third of the circle, like down here, right, where I've got the red, you see systems which have hitched their wagons to the IEEE 802.15.4 family of specifications, which includes such family household name protocols as Zigbee, 6LoWPAN, and Thread. Okay, just to be clear, Thread's like a smart home one that like Google and others are working with. It's not one that I've ever seen in lighting. I'm just throwing it out there for those of you who really dig this stuff. All right. So within that 802.15.4 family, notice the Zigbee cluster we have here. We'll kind of come back to this a little later. Zigbee is a specific protocol within that the larger family. So we talked about on the top third is Bluetooth. On the bottom third are these 802.15.4 based systems. Now, in the middle here, you see systems which are deploying a hybrid approach. These systems use an internal mesh network based on that 802.15.4, but they've also incorporated Bluetooth capabilities, most commonly for the purposes of configuration, right? Being able to set up the system from your tablet or smart device. And also for some of those beaconing, and wayfinding type applications that are out there, right? They also use Bluetooth frequently for that stuff. So this is sort of the second layer that we've applied right here. Next, we need to be specific when we're talking about Bluetooth. The systems in the middle top, like Avion, Kasambi, and Cooper Wavelengths Lite here, these systems use a standard Bluetooth like Bluetooth 4.0, okay, which that is a Bluetooth low energy standard, but it is not inherently mesh. These systems create mesh networks through proprietary means. Avion, as an example, achieves mesh capabilities through the Qualcomm's proprietary CSR mesh formula, okay? That's why they're in this box here of proprietary built on open. All the way over to the left, however, we have BLE mesh, which confusingly is its own protocol. And the Bluetooth mesh standard is what is referred to as a full stack open standard. It not only specifies the mesh property networks, the same as Zigbee, but it also specifies all the way to the application layer like Dolly. And that's why those systems around what what I call the Silvair cluster here, and there are other systems I left out, if they have that Silvair firmware, then they're able to operate all using the Silvair app, which in my opinion is like a really, really good one. And by contrast, you wouldn't expect Daintree's app to work flawlessly with Atani or Signify, even though they are all based on Zigbee. And in many ways, purportedly and like actually are fans and supporting open-based systems. Just the way they show up in the market, it's not as fully open, at least at the application layer, as what we have over here all the way on the left. So let's add one more layer. I mentioned Dolly, and we can add one more layer to this diagram by highlighting systems which offer either Dolly 2 or D4i drivers. Now, D4i is Dolly's wireless protocol, so that's totally in keeping with our wireless theme. So why am I including Dolly 2? Well, the reason why is because it helps to remind us that the open source movement and the push for greater interoperability is happening on multiple different fronts. It's not a single, it's not a single front in the grand scheme of things. It's multiple different fronts. And each of those are often at sort of different stages in their development of making it, what it means in practical terms to the consumer. Okay. Wireless protocols is one obvious front. That's the one we're talking about. But others which come to mind are like Dolly drivers, which is why I included Dolly 2 here. Zaga standards is another, and I'm sure there's more, but for brevity's sake, we'll just cap it right there. So when I showed the first iteration of this diagram, the takeaway was like, yep, the majority of the market is proprietary, built on open. However, as we've added more layers and talked about the nuances, we've started to see a more detailed picture emerge. We see increased momentum behind the open source movement, even if we aren't talking about totally open, whatever totally open means. We see increasingly systems adopting both 802.15.4 and Bluetooth, when the conventional wisdom was that these two protocols were in direct competition with one another, and in some forms they still are. But what we see here is like a healthy portion of manufacturers saying, I'm going to use the best of both. And last, we see two different competing hubs or visions for how far open source can be pushed on a practical level, as represented by the Silvair and Zigbee clusters that I have highlighted here. So, boy, that was fun, wasn't it? Hey, listen, guys, seriously, if you enjoyed that, I really encourage you, get on the Better Bricks website. We'll link to this resource in the notes, but we've developed this wireless learning guide. I think it's like network wireless lighting, network lighting controls, wireless guide. It's a great resource. It's digestible. It breaks it into pieces. It is meant to be a resource that encourages and enables people to have proactive conversations that help lead to yes, as opposed to somebody finds out, too far down the road and says, you're not connecting to my network. No, right? Like that's what we want to avoid. So this is a great resource. It doesn't matter where you are in your lighting journey, controls journey. I encourage you to check it out. We'll link to it in the video. And folks, I think that's it for me, right? So till next time, I'm John Wilson with Fernhill Shopworks. Don't forget to reach out. Let me know what you think. Love to answer your questions. Would even love to hear your constructive criticism. So bring it, I relish it. And thank you everybody who helped make this project a success. All right, I'll catch you out there.